In the universe as a whole, energy is available without limit. But on the human scale, which is ours, we are led to take account of the quantity of energy we have at our disposal. We do this spontaneously, but in return we should recognize the need to consider another fact. We have quantities of energy that we are obliged to spend in any case. We can always dry up its source. We would only have to work less and be idle, at least in part. But then leisure is one way among others of squandering, of destroying the surplus energy, or, to simplify, the surplus available resources. 24 hours of leisure activities cost, in positive terms, the energy necessary for the production of a day's supply of necessary provisions. Or negatively, if one prefers, a non-production of everything a worker would have produced in this lapse of time. Pure leisure is merely added to the outlets that the available energy has beyond what is required for basic necessities. These outlets are essentially eroticism, luxury products, and amusements, which are the small change of the holiday. Then there is work, which in some way increases the amount of production we will have at our disposal. And lastly, wars. Of course, what we spend in one category is in principle lost for the others. There are many possibilities of slippage. Alcohol, war, and holidays involve us in eroticism. But this means simply that the possible expenditures in one category are ultimately reduced by those we make in the others, so that only the profits found in war truly alter this principle. Even so, in most cases these profits correspond to the losses of the vanquished. We need to make a principle of the fact that sooner or later the sum of excess energy that is managed for us by a labor so great that it limits the share available for erotic purposes will be spent in a catastrophic war. Of course, it would be childish to conclude right away that if we relaxed more and gave the erotic game a larger share of energy, the danger of war would decrease. It would decrease only if the easing off occurred in such a way that the world did lose an already precarious equilibrium. Indeed, this picture is so clear that we can immediately draw a different conclusion. We will not be able to decrease the risk of war before we have reduced, or begun to reduce, the general disparity of standards of living. That is, the general disequilibrium. Eroticism is, in any case, even to the small extent that it has a history itself, on the fringe of history, properly speaking, that is, military or political history. As it happens, this aspect of the matter carries a meaning that allows me to broach the conclusion of the historical account this book constitutes. For there remains, under the conditions I have laid out, the possibility of an episode of eroticism's history. We have known eroticism on the fringe of history, but if history finally came to a close, even if it drew near its close, eroticism would no longer be on the fringe of history. It would thus cease to be a minor truth, whose importance is overshadowed now, as it has been for a long time by the factors that make up history. It might receive the full light of day and appear clearly to consciousness. True, the idea that history may end is shocking, but I can put it forward as a hypothesis. To my way of thinking, history would be ended if the disparity of rights and of living standards was reduced. This would be the precondition of an ahistorical mode of existence, of which erotic activity is the expressive form. From this necessarily hypothetical point of view, consciousness of erotic truth anticipates the end of history This consciousness brings profound indifference into the present time, the apathy of an ahistorical judgment, of a judgment tied to perspectives that are very different from those of men totally engaged in struggle. We cannot, by struggling, find a truth on which to base anything. In struggling, we never see more than a part of things, even if the movement opposing the will to remain where we are has its privileged value. On the contrary, it is by distancing ourselves from every reason for fighting, by achieving perfect moments which we know we can't surpass, that we have the power to assign to the movement of history that end which can only be insofar as it escapes us. This much that is clear might finally emerge from my book and from the epilogue that follows it. Men committed to political struggle will never be able to yield to the truth of eroticism. Erotic activity always takes place at the expense of the forces committed to their combat. But what is one to think of men so blinded as to be ignorant of the motives for the cruelty they unleash? At least we can be certain they are lying. But by no means can we try to replace their directives with our own. We don't expect anything from a direction. We cannot base our hopes on anything but a détente, in which a wisdom coming from the outside might make itself heard. Of course, this kind of wisdom is a challenge, but how could we not challenge the world by offering it the appeasement it needs? It can only be done in defiance of politics. Moreover, it is time in any case to oppose this mendacious world with the resources of an irony, a shrewdness, a serenity without illusions. For supposing we were to lose, we would be able to lose cheerfully, without condemning, without prophesying. We are not looking for a rest. If the world insists on blowing up, we may be the only ones to grant it the right to do so, while giving ourselves the right to have spoken in vain.
I hope it's not the first.